Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
We're here during a very political time. If you guys noticed, there's a lot going on. All of us in recent days, but I just thought I'd put my disclosures out of the way. And also, if you do ice baths, you know you do ice baths. Okay, if you do ice baths, if you don't live stream it, it didn't happen. Right? So that wouldn't happen. So yeah, cold plunge is very important. And then it's always like sacred numbers.
Increasing the meaningfulness of the academic spiritual work. There's a lot of interest in wellness. These are more
So the Tryptomics!
Woo! Come on, man! Nice to meet you.
So, blessed guys, welcome. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, and we're honored to be the testing lab for this cup, and we're stoked to share some of this data that we have, because this is some of the highest testing potency things we've seen. We had over 200 samples, over 81 participants. We got the public leaderboard up and going, so we have some really cool stuff going. We're also starting the 2025 Cup, so you missed out on your opportunity for 2024. You can submit it next week, and then you're starting to build data for this 2025 Cup. We're going to have a full year's worth of data. We're trying to come up with ideas for cheaper safety testing and edible testing to make that more accessible for everyone. We have little feedback sheets all around here, so if you guys have feedback like, damn, I wish they did this next year, let us know and we'll make it happen. So, kind of a little bit about us. What makes us different than any of these other companies out there providing testing is we really consider ourselves a contract research organization. So we're here to be a research partner more than just your testing lab, which kind of gives you these extra things after you get testing done. So how do you make your products with these alkaloids that you just found out you had? That's something we can help with, understanding that data and using it in a more meaningful way. We also do marker-assisted breeding. These are the things that I like. And so that's DNA sequencing, being able to create markers where you can select cool spores out of a group of things. And we're really trying to build a future of personalized natural medicine. We see a future where you got a plant medicine cabinet at home of your personalized plant medicine, your personalized microbe medicine, your personalized mushroom medicine. Kind of already do it. You pick the cannabis you like, and you only buy certain strains because those are the ones you like. So you got your personalized plant medicine kind of already down. We're starting to learn about this personalized mushroom medicine, and I think the future will be in the microbes of understanding that gut-brain interaction there. So some of the things that we found here, a lot of people always ask us about dosing. What do we find from dosing? How to dose mushrooms? This is kind of my scale that I came up with from personal use and just kind of other things, but basically, if you're under 1 milligram of psilocin EQ, we always talk in psilocin EQ here too. So that's the equivalent of psilocin or total potential psilocin. So you get all the psilocybin from the mushroom, you eat it, turns to psilocin. Psilocin's your active drug, so we talk about how much of the active drug you're getting. So microdose would be less than 1 milligram there. Take 1 to 3, it becomes very noticeable in my opinion. Teetering on intoxicating. At that 3 to 5, I find it intoxicating. It's not necessarily, I would call it a full psychedelic experience there, but it's that fine line of dosing here that, 1 milligram you barely feel it, 3 milligrams you might not want to drive your car. And that's something like, 2 milligram difference is huge. Psychedelic doses, depending on what that eighth was you ate back in the day, that could be anywhere from like 5 milligrams, 20, or maybe even more. John Hopkins dose, if you talk about it in psilocin equivalent, so they talk about 25 milligrams of psilocybin, about 21 milligrams of psilocin equivalent. Anything above 25 milligrams, I always say you probably should have a trip center for. Like, that's something you probably want to be around somebody you trust. Like, that's a very high dose of mushrooms. Understanding if your mushrooms have beta-carbolines is always a fun thing, so that's something we offer. I don't know if a lot of people knew about that this year, that you could have added beta-carboline testing on, but we did have one person do that and found them in their cubensis, so they are present still, and we test for 8 of them. Extracts are different. I have that up here just because I tried a lot of extract products, and when you make a product with an extract, the bioavailability is significantly higher. So even though it's a tested product normalized for this milligram dose, you're going to get more of those milligrams into your blood and feel it more. And so that's really what I have that up there, is just these ranges are talking about fruit for more or less. When you start to get in extracts, it becomes a little bit more intense, more, I don't know how the word to describe, bioavailable, I guess. But yeah, so this is one of the products we also this year offered for the first time safety testing as part of the cup. And so this was the only product that took us up on that offer. We went to go out and figure out if their microdose has any pesticides. And so definitely want to shout out to Brett as
You don't know until you test. It's amazing how much we're seeing right now with some of the mushrooms that are coming out, heavy metals in presence of them. And really, this is something we encourage people to start testing for. Heavy metals such as cadmium, lead, mercury, things like those come from the substrate. They don't, naturally in the mushroom. So you don't know until you test.
That's a huge point, and that's the thing that I think when we get this type of data, you can go start to figure out, do we need to maybe change our substrate recipes? Do we need to think about where we're sourcing these things from? Starting this point, and also I think the PCNEQ, it's a small number, but it's really that ideal dose of microdose. It's where you don't feel it. Most people would not feel 0.3 milligrams of psilocin. And so that's really that kind of dosing range that a lot of people are shooting for in the microdose product. But we'll get into some of our example macrodose products too here. And so kind of when we look at what we saw in this cup, this is a little bit of a rundown of what these tryptamines are. So when you think about it, you got the phosphate tryptamines, hydroxytryptamines, and we'll get all into this data throughout the next year with the Mercury Cafe events. So I can't go through everything right now, but we'll want to touch on kind of these max concentrations, because that's a reference range you can keep in your mind of like, what is high baeocystin? If you have 2 milligrams per gram of baeocystin, you have a lot of baeocystin in that mushroom relative to everything else we've seen. And so when you see that number up there, that's the max amount you'll ever see of that compound out of the 200 samples we tested here. The cool thing about those compounds is they're all related, they're all in the biosynthetic pathway, they're all tryptamines, so that's where Tryptomics comes from, we're the study of tryptamines. We studied these compounds here. We found these compounds in pretty much 100% of the samples we test for, so we don't really see where it's just psilocybin psilocin, like a lot of people have test results, it's like, oh, I only have psilocybin psilocin. It's like, well, no, you have all these things, you just can't see it. And so the low levels of detections get you to understanding those. And same with beta-carbolines, these are compounds in microgram ranges in mushrooms a lot of times, fractions of a percent. But a lot of papers out there say if you dose them in milligrams, it's not as effective as if you dose them in micrograms, and so there's conflicting evidence of what is the dosing of some of these harmful compounds. Not many mushrooms produce them, but I think it's something that the more we screen, the more we'll find them. And I personally think it has to do with, when mushrooms wear off, if you get waves or not. Kind of seems like an MAOI, maybe binding, building up, and then releasing, and then breaking down. I think there's some of these weird effects of mushrooms that we can kind of attribute to some of these MAOIs, or as well as just understanding if we're using these as an antidepressant drug, and people are on SSRIs. A lot of those don't interact well with MAOIs. And so we might want to figure out if these are the mushrooms we're going to be giving out in a therapy center, is at least my opinion of it. So yeah, that's something for the next year. You can always add this to your cup sample, and it basically costs what you would normally pay for your testing if you did the cup with the beta-carbolines added. It's just one normal tryptamine test cost. And so this one is also a really fun one, and we'll get some graphs here that Caleb will get to dig into more. Galeropsis polytrichoides is a really weird mushroom. That's a psilocybin-containing mushroom. Odd species. There's hundreds of these species out there. So Psilocybe cubensis is just a very small part of what psilocybin-containing mushrooms are. That one in particular is one of the lowest, under 1 milligram per gram of active ingredient. TTBBI is one of the strongest. That's a Pinnaeus cyanescens mushroom. And so we had seen some chocolate bars made with TTBBI that were one of the highest we've ever seen. And so Teo Bars was that person that did that with a 70 milligram bar. So when you think about that, if you were to eat that bar, that's like almost 3 times that John Hopkins does in one chocolate bar. Which in some cases that may be what you want. I don't think there's a best mushroom out there. I think some people want the most potent. Some people want the least potent. Some people want the middle ground. What's best for you? There's really no true best mushroom out there. But we did find the most potent ones in this competition though. So the highest testing samples we saw so far, that's 59 milligrams per gram of fruit. And for anybody, kind of just wild. And an extract gets to 9.3%. Before this, we had seen extracts testing up to 5%, maybe a couple over 5%. That's when you extract cubensis, a really big cubensis. You're doing the whole thing perfectly. You're getting about that potency. When we start to have 6% fruit, now you can extract those and get to like 9, 10% extracts, which become 100 milligrams per gram of that extract. That's a lot of active ingredient to be taking when we're talking about dose range of 1s to 10s of milligrams. Average mushroom here, it's gone up a little bit, mostly because I think these TTPPIs, and so when we look at a median, it was closer to what we saw before, about 6.54 milligrams of psilocin EQ. Average overall is 8.42, and yeah, previously it was just under 6.
Which corresponded to about 0.8% by weight and then 0.6% by weight. So just trying to move that decimal place one over for percentage.
It's a huge point. So anytime we switch back and forth between milligrams and percents, just know it's a decimal point moved over 1. 1% is 10 milligrams per gram. And so that's an easy way to always switch back and forth and understand your COA a little more because we report everything in milligrams per gram and weight percents. And so this year we had the DMT Cup, which we had 18 samples submitted total, but no raw bark. So this next year I want to make a push for raw bark that's sourced. So you put the website that you got the bark from, and you say, bark from this website, test up this. Because it creates a really cool, useful public database for people that want to extract bark.
Or acacia. The other one.
Acacia bark. We had one person submit an acacia sample this year. So we're really happy about that. And then also one person submitted a 5-MeO sample this year. And so kind of my idea with these things is as we add more natural products to this cup, or natural medicines to the cup, it'll just be something that if people submit enough next year, we pick a winner. If not, that data will build for the next 2 years. And once we get enough to compare, then we make a winner. So this year there's no 5-MeO winner, but I do want to shout out Ben Davis from Big Cat Genetic because he submitted the 5-MeO sample in this pipe here. So yeah, basically getting the source bark in the public database. Also, Kyle from Ikigai had a good idea to do a kind of DMT extraction comparison where we have bark in the lab and we use different pulling solvents to see what tryptamine profiles do you get from the same bark using different solvents. Creating that kind of public data is one thing I think this cup can kind of turn into. That'll be really cool going forward. Beyond that, cacti, this one was an interesting one. So we had not too many cacti. I think it was a total of 10 or so. It'll be on one of the slides in the next presentation. That one, learning how do we allow powdered cacti? Do we only want to do a cacti slice competition? Do you decore a cacti before you submit it for testing? All of these are things that it's like we kind of considered that, but we're also curious what people want because a lot of people are grinding out full cacti and extracting that. And so they want to test that. Or they core it and spine it, and they want to see what their theoretical yield is. So we kind of kept it open to everything. We're hoping next year, as we get more samples, we'll be able to kind of differentiate these categories. Have a slice competition where this is a slice of your cactus, whole cactus with spines, and all of that data is perfectly comparable across, anybody who's submitting it.
If you're a cacti grower, please provide your feedback to the cup. Scan that QR code in bathrooms and stuff like that. We want your feedback.
Most definitely, because the cacti is one I think we both thought about growing them for years, and I don't know, we developed a whole pheno hunters package because we have a lot of buddies that like seed pops, and if you pop 100 seeds, there's no way you're going to pay for that much testing, and it's hard to even judge which ones are more potent or less. And so being able to do micro sampling is one thing we've kind of developed to go after pheno hunting cacti. But that's something as well that we can do if you're like, yeah, I got way too many to decide and I don't even know what to enter. We have cheaper options of testing that let you kind of screen more and see, okay, these are your top 10% of mescaline potency. And so, yeah, when we look at 2025, I kind of want the active leaderboard all year. We're going to get V2 out here soon because V1 is cool, but V2 is going to be cooler and V3 is even cooler. So adding in some of these other things, being able to have a cacti board, we do ibogaine testing, ayahuasca testing, snanga testing. So these are things we are able to test if we want them in the cup, if that's something there's interest in. I think it's worthwhile to compare this. Snanga is very different from everybody. You get it from ayahuasca. We haven't been able to test too much just because it's one of those things that you're not really making up and selling anywhere. It's you're making for the ceremony. In ibogaine, we haven't really seen it as much, but we're going to have year-round submissions this year, so hopefully with all year advertising, you don't have to get your sample in the specific window and try and get the best thing right then. That'll create this kind of more fair playing field where everybody can just show off the coolest things at the end of the year. Idea 2 is we're going to keep same price and same grower ID, so you can just keep submitting stuff until the end of the year, and then we want to take all the feedback that you guys give us, kind of revamp it and be like, okay, the new cacti panel is going to have these things. This is how that competition will work. But all the samples, basically anything you submitted this year will be able to be submitted in the cup next year. But we may kind of switch around things on the first as we see what feedback we got, what we can do better, and what people want. So yeah, we're also going to add all these things to the leaderboard. These are like my V2 and V3 ideas for it. That QR code is also that feedback link, so if you guys want to scan it now and give me feedback, I'm all for it. But yeah, so this is kind of, I think, what everybody's here for.
Yeah, so as Chris mentioned, the visualization of the data side of things, this is massive range of data. I think we saw probably one of the most potent mushrooms ever tested on this planet thus far, which really is just incredible. The amount of milligrams of active compounds in this are record-setting. Then on the low end of things, so this dose range, really is almost close to zero. It's low near our detection limits for some of these compounds. To well over calibration limits. So kudos to those making some of the most strongest mushrooms, but also to those that are making the most average. And I think we're going to touch on those tonight, some of those folks that hit kind of the middle of the road category. That red line there being that average for the whole cup. And again, I want to phrase that psilocybin EQ is what you're going to see a lot of here in the results that are going to be presented. Psilocybin EQ is that psilocybin conversion to psilocin, as Chris mentioned. So think of it as your THCA to total THC conversion that you might see at a dispensary. Cacti category that, again, we had only a few submissions for, but we started looking at new alkaloids that have, again, never been explored in some of these cacti. So we're really excited to see folks submit more for next year so we can see that variance in other alkaloids that are present. These other alkaloids we are 100% sure play into the effect of a mescaline-containing cacti. We're just not entirely sure, neither is the research. Potency range on those really varies from, up to 25 milligrams per gram down to, again, almost low near detection limits, so close to 0 milligrams per gram of mescaline. So cacti, you don't know what you get till you test it, unfortunately. Last one here is the DMT side of things. So the 18 samples that were submitted is primarily, of course, NN-DMT being in there. Most folks were getting over the 80 percentile into the 90s. With the, I would say that for those that are producing some of the mimosa extracts and things like that, not presented on this graph, is tryptamine content. We're seeing tryptophan and tryptamine content in some of these DMT-containing products. And then on the acacia side, we don't see some of those compounds. So it's just really interesting. What you extract from really depends on what's going to play into that kind of ensemble effect, or that total composure of what all the compounds that are in there that are creating the psychotropic experience.
And one thing I would like to add to that is the idea of what this NMT-DMT ratio is. So a lot of that people, like NMT is one of the things that you don't normally see on these kind of tests, and we see it most of the time. You kind of see there's an orange bar on all of those. So that ratio of NMT to DMT is, in my opinion, linked to the experience of this compound. The NMT is a softer, more gentle version of DMT, And so that ratio that can change how that effect from that pen or whatever you're smoking it with. And so I think that's something we're going to learn in this next year as more people submit acacia bark. Acacia bark is generally higher in NMT when you extract it. There's other DMT containing plants out there that'll have different ratios of these things too. So as we get into the Polaris grasses and all of these things where it's more sustainable ways of harvesting DMT, we'll start to see these ratios change, and I think that's one of the important things here. These are kind of the two, maybe the THC and CBD of cannabis, if you would put it that way. I think we will see other things come out of DMT testing that it's 99% pure this, but it has these other compounds in it, and they play some role. The smell, the taste, that I think there's multiple things there potentially.
Absolutely. One thing with DMT too, unfortunately, we'd love to see safety testing on that in the coming year. A lot of people extract DMT with hexanes or heptanes, some of these carcinogen solvents. So we really encourage people get it tested before you consume it, so you know that your product doesn't contain any of those solvents left over from the extraction process. And as Chris mentioned, 2025, it's going to come. And in 2024, we want to thank the Psychedelic Cup again for all of their hard work putting together this event. We really appreciate them having us out and getting all testing for y'all, and stay in touch with us. You can talk to Chris or myself for more information on the data. Check out the leaderboard that Chris has been working really hard on, so we get Chris a ton of credit for that. But thank you again, everyone, for coming out.